Live. Welcome to very special Roots of Faith as I am joined by my most beautiful wife, Haley G. Scott.
I'm Haley.
So, welcome as we're going to be discussing the idea of Halloween, All Hallows Eve, and All Saints Day, and looking into are these from pagan origins or do they come from a more Christian understanding? So, kind of just giving you a summary of where we're springing off from. I've been doing a series talking about the history of our Christian roots, and we kind of first went through all of how Christianity kind of came into being, this Judeo-Christian sect there, how post the start of the Acts of the Apostles and the Apostolic Scriptures there, Christianity kind of was forced out of Judaism from being just another sect. And then my last one was on the Holy Roman Empire and how did we get to Constantine and understanding of, where did Rome kind of come into play here. So that's kind of where we're going to spring into some of these post biblical festivals that particularly the Catholic and liturgical churches still hold to, but are also still a major part of many Protestant churches. So, I'm going to look at one scripture that kind of is the All Saints Day mantra there that Haley is going to read for us tonight.
Okay. So the scripture is from Hebrews chapter 12, verses 1 and 2. Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely, and let us run with perseverance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith, who, for the joy that was set before him, endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God.
Right. So within most liturgical churches, Catholic being in particular, the idea of All Saints Day and the cloud of witnesses whom we look to, this is kind of the core verse for this season and festival. So we're going to get into our first topic. Where did Halloween come from? So we've both been kind of doing some studies on this idea. I spent a very long portion throughout the week scrolling through articles, podcasts, listening to anthropologists, historians, theologians, trying to figure out, how, if we are as Christians should even be a part of this festival. Should this be anything, brought into Christianity? And how, as believers, should we kind of take this holiday and interact with our people and our culture surrounding us? So, where did Halloween come from? Well, let's first look at the name. Halloween is a blending of words of All Hallows and Even, or Ean, referring to the evening before All Hallows Day or All Saints Day, which is November 1st. So, on this celebration, regions or parishes held different days for memorializing fallen saints who have entered heaven's gates until Pope Gregory the Fourth in 835 proclaimed November 1st as being All Saints Day and November 2nd to be All Souls Day. So let's just kind of stop here at the history of how this day was selected. So, looking at some different views on this day, we've looked at it's mostly Celtic and Celtic, Druid, Gaelic cultures were the ones who kind of really had a lot of influence on the start of November for being the idea of this celebration.
I think it was primarily coming out of like the Celtic regions is where the November idea came from.
Because, as mentioned earlier, there were throughout the Roman Empire, which was very vast, the Holy Roman Empire, having multiple sections of the world with so many vast cultures. They kind of were going through these runnings of, well, this is culturally part of our day, so we're going to kind of look this day, and then we're going to set this day. In the Eastern Church, it was very much in the spring. Well, in the Western Church, there's a lot of pull on the fall side of the calendar there. So there was kind of a big dissension up until Gregory IV decided, for unification of the church, we are all going to celebrate on this day. This will be the sole day that we are celebrating the festival of the saints, All Hallows Eve.
I think the more Western church up until that point was celebrating it in the spring.
Yeah.
Is that right? And then
in May.
Yeah, or maybe it wasn't the Western church, but it was the larger non-Celtic Christian church, and they decided to move. And one of the possible reasons, I was reading in an article from actually Catholic 365, was that the people who were coming to Rome for the celebration had been coming. I think it previously had been in the spring, and then one of the possible reasons that they actually relocated the time was because of the lack of resources for all of the people that were coming, and it was easier to feed them after harvest.
Yeah. And I was looking at that same article there. And then, of course, we get to the big one, Samhain, often referred to as Samhain Day. So, what is the history of this? Haley, would you like to take the lead on this side?
Sure. Samhain is so based on, let's see, a historian who works at
Baylor University, yeah.
And her research that she did, Samhain was, and any research ever really, Samhain is unknown what their actual rituals were surrounding it. All that's really known is that it's a celebration of the start of fall or the end of summer. And the word Samhain actually comes from a Celtic word or a Gaelic word, I guess.
Yeah, the month of November.
Meaning the month of November or the end of summer.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a quote here if I can find it really quick. Of course, I screenshotted them so they'd be easy to find, but apparently that didn't work. Okay. Let's see. I guess this is the one I wanted. So this is from that professor/historian at Baylor University, and she's quoting Nicholas Rogers, who wrote a book, I believe, called Holloween, From Pagan Ritual to Party Night, that was published in 2002 by the Oxford University Press. And he said, if Samhain imparted to Halloween a supernatural charge and intrinsic liminality, it did not offer much in the way of actual ritual practices, save in its fire rites. Most of these developed in conjunction with the medieval holy days of All Souls and All Saints' Day.
There's a lot of folklore that kind of surrounds Samhain. If you've listened to anyone who's of the kind of everything is pagan side of like Hebrew
mindset, I
root
believe.
mindset of Hebrew roots, Messianic faith. Fundamental Christians are also very big into it, and atheists.
Yes, strangely atheists.
Strangely, atheists are kind of like the major proponents, and then for some reason, Messianic and Hebrew roots kind of come right alongside them to call out the same thing the atheist is saying to disprove Christianity.
Yeah, and that's mostly so the first person who credited Samhain to being the real roots of Halloween was an anthropologist in I want to say
19th century.
Yeah, by the name of James Frazier, and that's actually the exact quote I was thinking of. He he did a study on the practices of the northern Celtic people on Hallow Mass, which is uh, All Hallows Eve, All Saints Day, and All Souls Day, right? The 3-day. And he claimed that the ancient pagan festival had been a day to honor the dead, and that's where, that's what Samhain was, and that's where Halloween came from. But he was actually the first person to ever say that, and then other anthropologists kind of piggybacked off of him, if I'm correct. And he was, but okay, so the thing about him though, he was of the belief that Christianity came from paganism. So we pretty much need to take anything that he observed with a grain of salt, because he was operating under the assumption that Christianity itself came from paganism.
Yeah, and it's interesting, the more I listen to historians and like people who on both sides, from Christian, Catholic, Celtic, I say Christian and Catholic like they're two separate things, but I guess Protestant Christians versus Catholic Christians, on the idea of, is Halloween pagan and where does its roots really come from? No matter what, we're going to have to operate with some sort of bias. Interestingly enough, the most honest secular anthropologist will tell you we really don't know a whole lot about the ritual side of Samhain.
Yeah, well, the Celtic people, none of their history was even documented in writing until after the Christianization of the area. So we really don't know, because before the Christians came to that area, they didn't write anything down. So they don't know. They don't know what it was.
In fact, one article put out by Crossway writes that what information is available comes from Irish monks who recorded the pre-Christian history of their people, as well as other Christian scribes denigrating pagan rites. It seems, however, that the observance included stocking up supplies for the winter, slaughtering cattle, and disposing of the bones in bonfires, which in time came to be known as bonfires. There were gatherings of communities for feastings and drinking while this was going on, but there was also awareness of thin time of the year and this possibility of otherworldly visitors showing up at the party. So one very interesting thing, and I'll go ahead and correct this right now, this was actually from a different article from the I said Crossway, but this one actually comes right out of
365, is that one?
No, this one comes from the actual one on ancient literature and rites of cults. This is actually a cultic website that actually does a documentary on these ideas, and they were focusing on, to be honest, and they're probably one of the more honest ones. If you look at the Encyclopedia Britannica, which their article was written almost 100 years ago, by the way, kind of crazy to think that 1926 was almost 100 years ago.
That is
But
crazy.
that article really stemmed off of what's his face, Freer or
Frazier?
Frazier said, and they kind of just took what he said and ran everything he wrote about that as fact, because there was no real fact checking, especially because the 20s were kind of a movement far away from Orthodox Christianity. So it should come as no surprise that anything they can use as ammunition in the scholarly realm became hard evident fact, even with lack of evidence. And let's face it, the amount of archaeology we've had since 1939, specifically in ancient Near Eastern mythology and everything, which disproves so much of the Nimrod sun god cult. I'll call it a cult because it's pretty much what many sacred name and Hebraic roots people kind of hold as fact, as, oh, well, this guy Nimrod in the Bible, he was the first to be deified, and then all legends come right out from him. And again, that comes out of the 20th century,
Yeah.
thanks to Alexander Hislop
Yeah, there you go. I
and
can't remember the name.
his book of crap called Two Babylons.
Crap, yeah.
That's what it is.
Yes, it was mainly fabricated, and he wasn't even a Christian, was he?
He was a Presbyterian pastor trying to discredit the Catholic Church in Scotland.
Yeah.
It was an attempt to say, oh, well, you see, Rome, they're all just a whole bunch of filthy pagans who just stole from all these pagan religions, and this is why you're worshiping the Pope when you celebrate Christmas, Easter, Valentine's Day, etc., etc., etc.
Yeah.
So we've kind of jumped around in the notes and everything there, but let's see. We've looked at Rogers. We've looked at the history of Samhain.
I think a lot of times we hear what pretty much amount to being like urban legends about Samhain and the origins of Halloween.
Mm-hmm.
Because you hear all kinds of different things that weren't even something that happened.
Yeah. And most of them didn't come till about the last 500 years. A lot of our stories that people populate come out of the Middle Ages and the 16th, especially up in the 16th, 17th, and 18th century, is really where these folklores kind of really developed. And the ones that predated it were either started, ended, or took place around Samhain, particularly because of one idea that the veil between the physical realm and the spiritual realm is the thinnest on this night.
Yeah, and so I have a quote here from that same professor from Baylor University,
Mm-hmm.
and so she says it's the medieval Christian festivals of All Saints and All Souls that provide our firmest foundation for Halloween, both emphasizing dead souls, both good and evil, to decorating skeletons, lighting candles for processions, building bonfires to ward off evil spirits, organizing community feasts, and even encouraging carnival practices like costumes. The medieval and early modern traditions of Hallowtide fit well with our modern holiday. So most of our modern day traditions that are, well, it's predominantly the Western world that really
Mhm.
celebrates Halloween in a secular way, but
Particularly America, Canada, and interestingly enough, Australia.
yeah, well, and the UK does to some extent
Yeah.
as well, but it really comes from medieval Christian practices surrounding those days because All Hallows Eve or Halloween is basically it's the evening before All Saints Day.
Mm-hmm. And so moving then to All Saints Day, which is November 1st, and it is the day when the church recognizes its forebearers. The day's origin was to honor Christian martyrs. However, it has come to be a day of remembrance of God's faithful people who have died. Hebrews 12:1 is the key biblical reference for this day. I'm going to read a quote from Christian Worship by Siegler and Bradley. It's a great book there. I highly recommend it. It was actually one of the required readings for one of my Christian worship classes in seminary. That going on to say that All Saints Day is an appropriate time to recognize persons in the congregation who have died in the previous year, as well as Christians who form a cloud of witnesses. The color for the day is white. All Saints Day is an ideal time for a homecoming, a day of people to share about Christians who influence their lives, a time to share about the denominational, congregational, and ecumenical saints.
Yes, and so Halloween being like the evening before that, so I guess more or less when you start it, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
is it's like kind of meant to be almost like a mockery of death.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're not afraid of you, because we know the truth that Jesus defeated death. And
Mm-hmm.
So here I have another quote. I'm just the queen of quotes tonight from Catholic 365 again. Speaking to that and speaking to the when Halloween can be more on the side of satanic depending on how you celebrate it. So here's the quote. Where Halloween goes from biblical to satanic is when you focus not on the mocking of death or victory over death, but when you focus on the celebration of those things that bring about death, vampires, witches, devils, etc. This is a huge distinction. In the sports analogy, this would be like going from rooting for the home team and mocking the evil visiting team to now cheering for the visiting team and mocking the home team. So in Halloween, receiving death as a martyr is celebrated. Receiving death as a martyr is celebrated. And receiving death is celebrated precisely because it brings us into the eternal life. What is not celebrated is those that deliver death, like the Romans did to the martyrs. So when approaching Halloween, we root for the martyrs, not the Roman soldiers. You root for the ones who received death, not the ones who delivered death. So in our modern practices of Halloween, a lot of times we are seemingly celebrating the deliverers of death, so to speak, the monsters, the ones that we would fear death from. And that, according to this article, would be the antithesis of the origin of Halloween, which is a triumph over death.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. One scholar who I was reading talked about how when Christianity came in to settle the Celtic islands in 300 CE, and they looked at how the Celts feared death and this idea of the veil between life and death weakest around this time frame gave them this sense of fear and dread of, being vulnerable. And in fact, it was the Christian missionaries who kind of saw their fear and said, oh, let me tell you about the good news. That you don't have to fear death. That death has been conquered. That we above us in heaven have those who have gone before us and faced death, now standing in the throne room of God, and they are standing and cheering for us. And waiting for our homecoming. It is not the time for us to fear what our ancestors will do in revenge for us, but to remember and honor what they did for us in going through life.
Yeah, I think that Halloween is often looked at as being Samhain with a cross painted on it.
Mm-hmm.
But in reality, if you look at it throughout history, what it really more likely was the church's response to Samhain and to that mindset of being afraid of death and that death is your master, or that the dead are your master and to be feared.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
And this is kind of why when they took over, when Rome was Christianized after the 300s and about the 5th century, that the pantheon to the Greek gods was ripped or was completely gutted of its pagan heritage, and they said, now we will no longer worship these false deities, but we will turn to Yahweh. We will honor the God of the Bible. We will focus on, instead of praying to these statues that hear nothing, see nothing, but we will look towards and we will remember. And there's an interesting thing with as Protestants, we often give Catholics a bad rap for icons and statues that they don't actually uphold to, and how they kind of focus on these as images for remembrance and ideas of, well, Saint so-and-so, he embodies this before his death, and this is why he was martyred, and this is a strength that he has, and so I will hold on to the remembrance of what someone else has done, and remember, okay, well, if he could do that being human, then so can I. And that's kind of, and we do it the same with sports. Why do we wear jerseys with people's names on the back when we're, especially, in high school sports and everything, we're like trying to embody, okay, well, I want to throw like Nick Foles in the Super Bowl. I know that's a couple years ago, and he's not having the greatest season right now in Chicago, but it just besides the point. He was the first one who came to my mind there because I'm a diehard bleed green Eagles fan.
Not relevant.
I know, but it kind of is actually at this point that I was making. But that's the same ideology that our Catholic brothers and sisters have in looking at the saints and the martyrs who have gone before us, and that's kind of why they kind of decided, well, with all these days or all these people who have been canonized as saints, because in the 3rd century we had dozens upon dozens a day going to death in martyrdom for their faith and their refusal to recant their faith in Jesus, Yeshua, as the one true God. So we need to just kind of set aside a time to remember the strengths of those who have gone before us, a time where we can come together and say, we will imitate, just like as Paul would say, imitate me as I imitate Christ. Well, that's kind of the same idea that stands behind All Saints Day.
So conclusions, is Halloween pagan or Christian?
So if you were using pagan in the terms of pagan in the sense it used to be, which is secular, I say, yeah, you can probably call Halloween pagan, because in our commercialized Western society, it's pretty much a commercial. I mean, comparatively, the only holiday that brings in more revenue for businesses is Christmas.
Well, I don't think I would use the word pagan because that's not the context that people use it in.
It's true.
I would say modern day Halloween is secular.
Yeah.
And it's cultural.
Very cultural, especially in Western culture.
But I would say that it likely does not originate from pagan origins.
No. In any of the pagan origin, quote unquote pagan origins that did exist, pretty much were removed or overshadowed or completely obliterated by the Christian ideologies that were placed in front of it.
Yes, and so if you are a Christian who is choosing to celebrate Halloween and feeling at all, I guess, nervous about that, I would say, like, my advice would be, don't honor the ones who bring death.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in fact, that was how skeletons and things kind of came into play, which was we will we will use these images of the human body to kind of show those who were destroyed by death, but yet now they exceeded and sit in heaven and are now sitting in the throne room above us, looking down, cheering us on through the race to finish it. It's kind of death, you mock me, we will no longer cower in fear. You are defeated.
Oh, death, where is your victory?
Yep.
So here's a question that a lot of Christians might ask. If you celebrate Halloween, are you worshiping the devil?
Now, this is an interesting one because a lot of people out there will look at the Wiccans and the Satanists who say that Christians stole their holiday. And it's interesting because the fact is, these religions
are newer than Christianity.
Very much, like within the last couple hundred years.
Like, I guess some aspects of Wicca can link themselves back to like Celtic origins, but as we've said, we don't really know what Samhain it really was or what they really did during it, so they don't really have any ground to stand on, even if they're tracing it back to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, am I worshiping the devil? Well, if you're making your goal to put on a red suit and pitchfork and wear horns to kind of run around the streets and dressing your babies in little blue demon outfits and not going to a Blue Devils game, then
well, yeah, I wouldn't say you're necessarily worshiping the devil if you do that, but you're glorifying, you're honoring him.
You're bringing some sort of reverence.
You're celebrating, to him. You're celebrating him. But yeah, so in my opinion, celebrating Halloween is not worshiping the devil.
No.
Which, by the way, you cannot accidentally worship the devil if you're worshiping something that implies that you're consciously giving them worth, and if you are not doing that, then you're not worshiping the devil.
Kind of my response to people who claim that the Antichrist is the Pope. I don't see it. I may not very much agree with the Pope in a lot of aspects, especially our current Pope.
We're not Catholic, so we don't hold the papacy.
It's true. But at the same time, do I say the Pope is always wrong and he's not doing anything good for the kingdom of God? Most definitely not. I mean, Pope Francis has done a lot of good things in reforming the Catholic Church. Before him, probably one of the best popes who ever sat in the seat, Pope John Paul II, did a wonderful job, especially in defending pro-life statutes of Christianity and orthodoxy of the church. So, yeah, no, I don't think we can accidentally worship the devil. I don't think Catholicism is a false religion that has completely whitewashed satanic rituals to say, hey, follow us. And we'll get kind of into the interesting points in the next week when we talk about Reformation, because that also is October 31st.
Yeah, Reformation Day.
Yeah, so that'll be real fun when we talk about that next week.
Yeah, Reformation Day has more to it than a lot of people think, too.
Oh, yeah. What Luther and prior to Luther all kind of set out to accomplish.
Yeah, Luther's intent, like his actual intent.
Mm-hmm. So I've just been kind of hoping someone would ask me a question or make some comments on the live stream, but as we've had people pop in and out today, besides our one faithful listener out there on Roots of Faith,
assuming it's the same person.
Assuming
it's been there the whole time.
Yeah, because it's jumped from 1 to 2, but we've always had at least one.
Yeah.
So thank you for continuing to watch with us. I hope the rest of you, what you've caught has been a blessing. Also, don't forget all these live streams go right on to my podcast as well. So you can always download us and take us with you wherever you go.
Yeah, so like our Facebook page, subscribe to our podcast, anywhere that you're listening. Give, we're getting some comments over there now.
Okay.
It's Becca. Hi,
hey,
Becca. But anywhere that you are listening from or watching, you can like or subscribe. Yeah, and give us some feedback if you like seeing me on here. Maybe I'll come guest star more often.
Yeah, please. I enjoy having the side conversations here. Also, feel free to email me at wesd.wscott@gmail.com with any questions, comments, ideas for future discussions. And as always, hopefully we'll finally hammer out like a regular time so everyone can kind of just expect us to show up here.
Yeah.
It's hard when your weekly schedule varies week to week and sometimes even day by day.
Yeah, well, but if you like what we're talking about, let us know. If you hate what we're talking about, let us know.
If you think I'm completely off the wall and think I need to get saved, I'll listen.
That goes into hate. But anyway, so I think that pretty much wraps it up.
Yep. So we'll close out. Also, Shabbat Shalom to all you people who are listening, especially my Messianic and Hebraic roots friends. I know I've kind of ragged on you a lot tonight.
Well, you weren't ragging on them. You're just on some opinions that exist.
Yeah. General opinions throughout the movement anyway. But so may Yahweh bless you, may he keep you, may he make his face shine upon you, and may he give you his perfect peace. Shalom and blessings.